Let's continue our conversation around innovators, and let's turn our focus to the business world, although we have already been talking a little bit about the business world already. But let's shift our focus to one of the greatest innovators in business or in tech, Apple. Yes, if you know me, I'm an Apple fanboy. I've got countless Apple devices everywhere, and I'm Apple till I die. Well, I'm not going to say that because someone better could come along eventually, but they'd have to have something quite incredible to be me. Now, if you're anything like me, you get really, really excited around this time of year because a new iPhone is announced. Now, although I don't buy a new phone, I used to buy a new iPhone every year. Like every time they bring out an update, I'd always get a new one. I'm a little wiser with my money now and know that it's not that important and focused on investing in our mission now rather than new phones. However, I still get really, really, really excited when they launch a new iPhone. The iPhone 14 just launched, and while yes, I admit Apple have lacked in innovation over many years since they did the AirPods, that was probably their last big innovation, and everything else has been, let's say, improvements rather than innovations. However, they have brought out their new phone with a new feature that has just been so innovative that everyone now is copying it. That because of this one little feature, almost immediately after the Apple event that they announced it, on social media, all of the other phone companies were kind of advertising their version, and that is the dynamic island. So cool. I was excited about it. I'm like, well, actually, I recently dropped my phone and broke it. Maybe I won't go and repair it. Maybe I'll get myself a new iPhone so I can have an island. But then wisdom prevailed. I'm like, no, I'm going to stay focused on the mission. Not right yet, but that dynamic island, this new innovation in the phone has just brought out this, now from the notch, or that's turned into a pill now, is now a dynamic island for Apple. When you're talking smartphones, everyone hates the notch. There's notches. How big is the notch? It's always the story. Well, now Apple didn't even just make it a pill. They made it a dynamic island, and now they've created all these features around this one thing that is such a pain point for most smartphone users. I know, first world problems, right, Dr. Rod? That we complain about this little space in our screen being black. But what they did is they innovated. They didn't just take this thing and make it smaller. They took it and made a feature out of it. They really innovated. Now all the notifications come out of it, and they've actually used it as a feature now. Now, since this iPhone's been brought out, it has been wrought with problems. People will say that in Instagram and in TikTok and in other apps, the camera is shaking. They say that there's issues of the Apple CarPlay connectivity, and there's all these issues. Now, there's all these complaints about these these things, but I actually think back to whenever I've gotten a new Apple device, Dr. Rod, and I remember when the iPad Pro first came out. Actually, no, the first iPad. When the first iPad brought out, I bought it sight unseen. I had never touched one. I had never even played with one. I just saw it and went, I've got to have that. That's going to fit perfectly in my business. And it did. It became a great business tool. But I was one of those what we call early adopters, right? And as an early adopter, I'm well aware that people are innovating, and I know when I get something new, it's a little bit annoying, but I don't get upset if they have problems because I just shrug it off. It was really interesting when I saw all these people on social media all complaining about the fact that the iPhone's not working and everything like that. It actually made me think, I'm like, why don't I care? And then I realized when you talk about the innovations, and there's this theory of called diffusions of innovation, which actually groups people into the different levels, whether they're early adopters or whatever. I would consider myself an early adopter, and as an early adopter, I don't care about those things because I understand its innovation. Dr. Rod, would you call yourself an early adopter?
No. I'm an economist. I observe how people behave. No, generally speaking, no. I'm not. Personally, I'm not a big risk taker. I'm very interested in the technology. I read a lot about it, but I still have an XS. That's my iPhone.
Wow.
Lots of reasons for that, and I think that's partly my upbringing. Of course, I was always taught you only buy something when you need it.
Yes.
And probably at my age, I should be sort of outgrowing that effect of my upbringing. But I think, look, what's happening in this market is not just the early adopters, but also in this market, you've got some people who are turning over their phone because there are a few models behind.
Yeah.
And maybe updates are no longer being provided, or it's just too old. In some cases, it's not worth replacing the battery, and so on and so forth. So you not only got early adopters, but because smartphones are generic in the sense that there are many, many brands that have been on the market now for a few years, some people, no doubt, who are complaining weren't necessarily early adopters, but were just replacing an old phone anyway.
Yes.
The other thing too is that these phones are quite expensive, and generally speaking, people equate quality with cost. And so when something unexpected happens, like what seems like a fairly basic failure, then they get a little bit upset.
Yep.
The other thing that's going on too, I think, is if you have a look at the contract, and of course nobody ever does, it's too long and you haven't got time to read it anyway. But if you actually have a look at the contract, you contract out of being upset if anything goes wrong effectively.
Yes.
So nobody ever guarantees their software, providing it's not a hardware issue. And it seems that most of it is software issues. And these are pretty well inevitable because it's almost impossible to fully test software before you release a product to the market. If these are software problems, they will be fixed fairly quickly and most likely satisfactorily. And as you've alluded to already, Craig, I think that there have already been a number of updates to the operating system which have been designed to resolve some of these problems. So, yeah, it's a pretty complex situation. I think now, of course, we've got these two very strong rivals in the market. You've got Samsung and Apple in particular. They compete on many different levels, including in the courtroom.
Yes.
and that's the nature of this kind of market, where you've got a few very large players and lots of others sort of nibbling at the edges of that competitive mix. But there's a lot of pressure to at least pretend you've got a new innovation, to make a lot of it, so that you can sell a lot of phones. And yes, definitely some of that market will be early adopters. There's no doubt about that. And look, I'm sure we all know people, they buy it because they just love the technology. They're not trying to be one up on their neighbours. They just love the technology. And frankly, I think if I was a far wealthier person than I am, I would be regarded as an early adopter on just about everything.
Yeah.
Because I love the technology. I love to see these technological developments. I love to see what's happening in the marketing of these products as well, because to me, it's an expression of human creativity. And as of course, you know, that I believe that part of being a Christian, being made in the image of God, is to reflect his own creativeness. And so when I see all of this evidence of human creativity around me, I just marvel at it. So yes, if I was in receipt of a more secure, more constant and higher income, I would be regarded as an early adopter myself, I think.
That's good. I think that the reason why I actually bring this up and feel like it's a good topic for us to talk about on this podcast is I want us as leaders to understand this diffusion of innovation, right? I think it's important for us to understand it, because when we understand where people in the marketplace like sit, it allows us to innovate and set our expectations. I think that is probably the key thing here is I want to encourage you to set your right expectations when you do innovate, because we're obviously the theme of today is innovation, but we need you to be educated on your innovation. And so understanding the bell curve, right? So innovators, and you're probably wondering, why don't more people innovate? Well, they say that on average, only 2.5% of the population are innovators. So if you're someone that can innovate, if you're someone who can, like Dr. Rod said earlier, just identify a problem and come up with a solution to it, if you actually take that time out, you are now in the top 2.5% of the population. Don't you think that is going to put your business forward? Don't you think that's going to put your ministry forward? Don't you think that's going to put your organization forward if you are operating like the 2.5%? But where your expectations should be set is also that, yes, there's few that are innovating, but we as innovators need the early adopters. We can't do it without the early adopters, because the early adopters that actually take on our new concepts, our new ideas, the new way of doing business, the new way of delivering a product or service, the new way of using a product, like or a new device. There is only actually, and early adopters are actually only make up 13.5% of the population. So just remember, like when you've innovated, you're like, why is not everyone come running towards me? Well, it's because only 13.5% of the population now think about it. It's not the whole population. Think about just 13.5% of your target audience are going to be early adopters. So you're only actually targeting a few people to get it. Now, they say that it's called a marketing chasm. The biggest challenge between the early adopters and the early majority is this marketing chasm. How like for it to get real momentum, that's the challenge. And how do we do that? We must have a great relationship with those early adopters. Get their feedback, build relationship with them. Do what Apple does. They've created fanboys. Like they got me with those Mac and PC ads, with the skinny guy his name was Mac, and the slightly chubby guy that was called PC, and he kept getting sick, and the Mac guy Mac is like, I don't ever get viruses, right? So they got me, right? They got me as part of their community. And because I'm part of the community, I'm part of the ecosystem, I'm sold on what they do, because they've given me something that's made my life better. They've actually given me something that's different, that's set me apart. And so we as innovators need to make sure we build a really solid relationship with those early adopters, because and get feedback from them, build relationship with them, because it's those ones that are actually going to help our business then get over that marketing chasm into the early majority. And once we hit that early majority, that's where we actually really take on. But the early majority only take things on after it's been proven, right? That's why you're getting all these people that are complaining about the Apple iPhone having these issues. I guarantee you most of them are people that have switched from Android, or they're people that aren't really Apple fans. They just happen to have an Apple phone. But unless you're most of the fanboys and fangirls, will kind of take it. Like, yes, they'll complain and they'll go, yeah, look, fix your act, Apple. But it's not like they're going to jump ship to Android. No way. That's like swearing. That's blaspheme to think that we're going to jump from Apple to Android. And that's what you need to get. You need to build the relationship with those early adopters, because those early adopters are going to help you spread to the early majority. And then it's that early majority that need it proven first, but then those are the ones that will then take it to the masses. So as business leaders, as leaders in ministry, in business, in politics, and wherever you are, make sure you're innovating, but understand who you're communicating to, that you're innovating to early adopters first. And then those early adopters, we need to build relationships so that then we can reach the early majority. Hey, that was an excerpt from our On the Cube Leadership podcast. If you enjoyed it, give it a thumbs up, put a comment below. And if you want to see more content like this, faith-based leadership development content, make sure you check out our channel, give it a subscribe, and hit the bell notification so that you'll be notified when we release new content.